Welcome back to the deep dive. We got a really interesting question sent in asking if H.P. Blavatsky actually taught that some living people are, well, soulless.
Yeah, and for anyone familiar with theosophy, that sounds immediately wrong, doesn't it?
It really does. Given the whole emphasis on unity, the soul's journey, it just doesn't seem to fit.
Right.
So our mission today is to dig right into Blavatsky's own major works, The Secret Doctrine, Isis Unveiled, The Key to Theosophy.
Sticking only to what she wrote. No later interpretations for now.
Exactly. Let's see if we can find the source of this claim or debunk it using her words.
Okay, so the first sort of big point is when Blavatsky does use that term soulless, it's almost always about post-mortem states.
After death, you mean, not living people walking around.
Pretty much exclusively, yes. It's not about people being born without a soul.
Okay, let's break that down. The foundation of her thought is this one reality, right? A universal oversoul.
And her third fundamental proposition comes from that basically all souls are sparks from the same fire. They're fundamentally identical.
And they all have to go through the cycle of incarnation.
Yes, it's an obligatory journey for every single soul. It's about evolution. Now, she describes our inner makeup, the immortal part, as a triad.
Atma-Buddhi manas.
That's it. Atma is the universal spirit. Think of it like impersonal sunlight shining everywhere.
So not my individual bit of spirit, but the spirit.
Exactly. Buddhi is the vehicle for that light, the spiritual soul. And manas is the mind, the thinker, where individuality really sits. It has higher and lower aspects.
Got it. And reincarnation is the mechanism for all these souls, these sparks to evolve. No special creation.
No special creation. It's a universal law. Okay, so now we get to where soulless actually comes up in her writing. Post-mortem stuff.
Like Kamaluka.
Precisely. Kamaloka, the desire world. After death, there's what she calls a second death.
Which is?
The separation of the higher principles, Atma-Buddhi manas, from the lower ones, the more personal, perishable parts.
And what's left behind in this desire world?
She calls them shells. These are basically the Kamarupa, the desire body's remnant, but without consciousness, just echoes.
Okay, shells. Anything else?
Yes, elementaries. These are a bit different. They're the Kamarupas of people who were, really depraved or materialistic, people who weakened their connection to their higher triad, to Atma-Buddhi during life. She explicitly calls these remnants soulless entities.
Okay. So entities, but not living humans, and still post-mortem remnants.
Yes. And she connects these elementaries to some phenomena in spiritualist seances, potentially misleading communicators.
Right, not people walking down the street.
Definitely not. She also mentions the very rare case of a lost soul, where the personality completely severs itself from the immortal triad due to extreme evil, leading to eventual annihilation. But again, that's a consequence of choices in life, affecting the post-mortem state, not a condition from birth.
Okay, that seems clear. But there must be something in her writing that sparked this soulless living people idea.
There is. And it's likely this one passage in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, page 421. It's problematic.
What does it say?
Well, she writes something like, mankind is obviously divided into God-informed men and lower human creatures. The sacred spark is missing in them, the only inferior races. It goes on, verily mankind is of one blood, but not of the same essence.
Oof. Yeah, missing and inferior races sounds pretty bad.
It does. Now, context is key. She's discussing her theory of root races, vast evolutionary stages of humanity over millions of years, not modern races as we understand them.
So inferior races doesn't mean what we think it means.
Her races are these huge epochs. Her fifth root race, the Aryan, for example, explicitly includes Semitic peoples in her classification. It's complex and, frankly, uses terminology we find jarring today.
Okay. And the sacred spark, you mentioned it might be latent elsewhere?
Yes, there's ambiguity missing here, but elsewhere she uses latent. It most likely refers to the development of manas, the intellect. So latent would just mean undeveloped, not absent.
Still, that page 421 sounds like the smoking gun for the misinterpretation.
It almost certainly is. But here's the kicker. Just 4 pages later, page 425 in the same book, she writes, thus the reason given for dividing humanity into superior and inferior races falls to the ground and becomes a fallacy.
Wow, so she contradicts herself almost immediately.
Directly contradicts the implication of the earlier passage. And later, in her collected writings, she's even more explicit. There are really no inferior races, for all are one in our common humanity.
So, summing this up, Blavatsky did not teach that living humans are inherently soulless.
Correct. Her use of soulless applies to post-mortem remnants, or, very rarely, the fate of a lost soul after death.
And that passage in the Secret Doctrine seems to be the likely culprit for the confusion, taken out of its very complex and admittedly contradictory context.
Exactly. The language is difficult, the root race theory is intricate, and she even refutes her own potentially misleading statements shortly after making them.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How easily complex ideas, especially from another era, can get twisted.
Definitely.
And it underlines the need to go back to the source, read things in context before jumping to conclusions based on, online claims or sound bites.
Absolutely.
So a final thought for you listening. What other figures or philosophies might be getting this same treatment? Being misunderstood because we only see fragments or because the ideas themselves are complex? And what's our responsibility, really, to engage thoughtfully with the originals? Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.